Okay. Good evening, everyone. Sorry for the delay. We've, as I said in an email I sent earlier this afternoon, we had a bit of an issue with Zoom, and so we're doing this on Teams. So if there's any hiccups, it's Peter's fault, who's managing behind the scenes. Cathy and I had nothing to do with that. Welcome to the first of the 2023 Family Engagement Series. Can I first start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land and pay my respects to elders both past, present and any emerging young people. I'm coming to you from Durrag land, and it would be awesome if you could put in the chat where you're from, and we can make a record of that. Can I say that this is going to be the first of us on our continuing role in trying to raise the awareness, particularly with government and with schools, at the importance of family engagement. Last year, as you recall, we held a 2-day conference in Canberra, which we were celebrating AXO's 75th anniversary, but also raising the profile of family engagement with those with us, those around us, and those that were viewing in from out online. Sorry. Anyway, enough said about that. This is the continuity. Cathy was unable to make it, and the fortunate part about that is we're going to make her number one for our family engagement series for 2023. There will be a recording of this, so please be aware that we are recording, and to let you know, and also be assured that anything that you put in the chat we will address as we go, or at the most appropriate time. We will also, at the end of the day, tomorrow, oh goodness, it is a bad day today. Tomorrow we will send you a survey for you to give us some feedback about tonight, and we'll also send you any information that you might like about the conference did you not attend last year. So I'm going to hand over to Cathy. Cathy, you might like to give us a brief introduction of yourself, and then fire away with everybody has an opinion, and I'm not going to assure you I'm one of them. Thanks, Kath.
Thank you, Di. Di, if you wouldn't mind, because I'm new to Teams, sorry everyone, but if you wouldn't mind sharing what comes up in the chat, that I might be able to reflect, because I can't see that on this screen. I hope everyone can see my screen. Just a little introduction. I was a school principal in the Catholic system, 28 years a teacher, 10 years a principal. I retired to the Sunshine Coast to actually raise my own 3 teenage children, and each of them actually had learning difficulties, ADHD and dyslexia. And even though I was a principal in a school, it was in North Queensland, and people didn't know who I was on the Sunshine Coast. And although I tried to contact teachers and to talk to them about how I might be able to assist, particularly with my background as a principal and my background in curriculum, I was dismissed a lot. And so that raised a question for me. Well, if I find it difficult to get through to teachers and to schools about my children's learning, how do people who don't have my front or my experience as a principal or my experience in schools, how do they cope with getting a message or a conversation going with teachers within the school about their individual child's learning needs? And hence, it's led to a PhD in this area. This year is D year. This is the year that I'm really to submit the PhD. And the PhD was working in both a primary school and a secondary school, again in the Catholic system, because that's the system I've always been involved in. And I worked with 5 teachers in the primary school and 3 teachers in the secondary to raise their awareness about parent engagement, and really to explain the difference between parent involvement and parent engagement in their children's learning and well-being, and how could that actually become part of their pedagogy and practice within those schools. At the end of a 12-month period working with both schools, I interviewed another group of 5 teachers in the primary and 5 teachers in the secondary who were not involved in the mentoring over that 12 months period. And we then surveyed all teachers in the school in terms of their engagement, their understanding of what is parent engagement. That culmination and that research that I'm really looking at the moment and pulling apart in the data, I'm unable to share at this particular stage because it needs to go to PhD status first. However, I've come across a very interesting document done by an organisation within the United States of America, and my research is really going to be looking at what, on a personal level, on a psychological level, on a institutional level, on an organisational level, are teachers, or is teachers' pedagogy and practice encouraged or not encouraged? What are the influences that don't allow them or do allow them to actually use their agency and actually use parent engagement in children's learning and well-being as an effective teaching strategy? This document is quite interesting because it highlights why we all have an opinion, and that why that opinion is so different. This research took place in the United States, and I'm looking at the end of the time, and I'd like to leave some time for discussion. Is it relevant to Australia? Is it relevant to you? Now, they took 2-hour interviews from about 10 practitioners. That's people who worked within the educational system, teachers, principals, policymakers, both at a federal and a state level in the USA, and public. And I've just written down those who watch the news. But there's an overlap between those 3 groups because policymakers are also parents and also public, and some of them may also be practitioners. But also I'm very interested because your organisation, Diane, is very much at the level of influencing very well historically in Australia, the government policy makers, and you've had so much progress since the year 2000 on really getting a recognition of parent engagement in children's learning, both in the national declarations, in the organisation of all the state ministers, and also within the teachers and principals standards documents that have come out as well. So I really congratulate your organisation on the wonderful work that you've done. And I gather some people tonight might be here as public, or be here as teachers, or may even be here just as a parent, and not just as a parent, as the most important role that I think, and most frustrating and most rewarding and sometimes most difficult role that we will ever do. So I'm going to flip through these and just show you. So it comes from this document, and I will share this whole document with you at the end so you can have a look at it. I put the link to the document as well. And they've worked with the National Organisation for Family, School and Community Engagement in the United States, which I'm sure, Di, you're aware of, called NAFSCI. Their definition of family, school and community engagement is anything that encompasses ways that adults interact to support children's development, academic achievement and long-term success. And what I found really interesting about this document, they've given a further definition, and they shorten family, school and community engagement, because some of us might just use parent engagement, some might use parent and community engagement. There is problems within Australia as well, because we don't actually have a set definition that we all agree to and adhere to, although many great research documents within Australia have come out with some. So I'm not going to read all that to you because it's in the document, but I'm really about, why aren't we all singing from the same hymn sheet? Why aren't policymakers, public criticisers, parents, teachers, all singing, all trying to work together for the one goal of what is the better outcome? What can really assist students' achievement and progress and their lifelong goals, and really change them for them? So why aren't we all putting the light bulb in together and singing from the same hymn sheet? Now, why I found this really interesting is because, first of all, there are many different, 3 foundational cultural models that they found within the United States, that the public, the practitioners and the policymakers, as you can see, I've got the 3 different columns, hold about schools and community. The public just sees them as places that have people in them, teachers and students, and the community they see as, it's got my neighbours. Whereas practitioners and policymakers, teachers and people who make policy in government, they add the other paraprofessionals as well. But the idea that communities act through informal institutional structures and formal community organisations is completely missing in that thinking. The number 2, caring is seen as the hallmark and precondition for successful relationships. So a teacher is seen as good if they care. Parents are seen as good if they're seen by the school as showing concern and caring. Now, that's not always easy, particularly with some of the parents and the students that particularly state schools deal with, in terms of their socioeconomic backgrounds, their mental health issues, just the whole social and cultural backgrounds from which they come. So on the reverse side of that one, the public sees, all 3 of them see, that poor parenting and poor teaching are attributed to a lack of concern. Interesting. The third model is morals, manners and responsibility cultural model. Schools, the public believe that parents are the first teachers. The practitioners, teachers, see it as part of their role. It really doesn't come much into the policymakers. The policymakers and the teachers see community as a place where kids learn and practice manners, morals and responsibility. Now let's have a look at that. Even within those 3 groups, we've got public holding all 3, practitioners just holding 2, and policymakers just holding the last 2 as well. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time now. And whether you come from, Di, you influencing policy at a federal level or a state level, or whether you come from just being, I have to stop saying just being a parent. What is your model of family, or what's your idea of family? I'll just give you just a minute to jot it down, and then you can have a look at what the people who did this research came up with. Now, I don't want to bore you to death with this tonight, but here's 3 models of family. The public hold all 3. Practitioners hold the last 2, and policymakers only hold the last 1. of what parents are and what role parents play. Are you starting to get a picture that we're not on the same page here, or particularly in the United States? Well, let's see how they define those models quickly. Family bubble. The family is a private space where child rearing and child development takes place. The family relationships are basically determine how good the kids turn out. The public blames the family when outcomes for the child are poor. This is not one held by the other two. Number 2, total parenthood. First way of thinking about parenting. This is held by both public and education practitioners. It holds that parents should dedicate their entire lives to satisfying their children's needs above their own, that it is their duty and total encouragement is a necessary component of good parenting. But it also holds a view of engagement as very much our previous understanding of parent involvement, volunteering, attending parent-teacher conferences, monitoring grades and attendance, helping with homework. Not one held by policymakers. The last one, parent as a guide, is a second way of thinking of parenting. The public switch back between the two. Practitioners primarily view family as a guide, but also have the view of total parenthood. See parents' role as managing opportunities for learning and growth as a guide rather than total providers. Parents enable children to learn how to make their way in the world. This is a position held by policymakers. So what then implications would that have in terms of how policymakers or federal and state governments would introduce, if that's their view of parents, that they're there to guide? Let's have a look at cultural models of schools. Di, please interrupt me at any stage.
No, that's fine. Can people hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
I can.
Oh, you can? I was just saying that if anyone wants to put anything in the chat, yeah, I can see people, and Jessica and Kate are typing away there. Oh, good, thank you. Yes, if you've got any, when Kath's asking for some thoughts, please put it in the chat, and I'll be happy to relay that through.
Oh, that'd be great if you could read that out, Di.
Absolutely.
So we're moving on to cultural models of schools. What is your framework of thinking about a school? What's a school? What's a school to you? What quickly comes to mind? Type in the chat and let Di read it out. Nothing there, Di?
Oh, no, it's coming. It's coming. I can see the typing going at 100 miles an hour there. A community surrounding education. So school being the community that surrounds education. And that even to me makes me think that the school's a bit beyond the walls of the fence, which is great. I can see typing going on here, Kath.
Keep going. It's good to be interactive.
A formalised place of learning with structure and expectations. My granddaughter will tell you there's rules. I'm not sure about expectations. She just says there's rules. Yeah, that seems to be all we're getting in there.
All right, that sounds great. Let's see what they came up with. Now, they actually came up with 5 models of schools, and noting that the public hold 3 of them in their research. This is not necessarily what relates to Australia, and that's where my research is really going to start to unpack the Australian. But again, mine is limited only to 2 schools in a Catholic system. Practitioners hold 3. and two of them don't equate with the public or parents, and policymakers only hold one. And that's a very interesting one. And Di, you've probably had a lot of experience at this, that particularly with this new productivity push by the government, that they really are after citizens, and citizens that contribute to the society in which they exist and contributed positively.
Sure, and outcomes, just outcomes, what comes out of it, not what we learn from it, because we learn from schools just as much as schools teach.
So that's a very interesting model. Let's quickly delve into the models. This one is very interesting, held by public and practitioners. There's a triad. It exists of parents, teachers, and students. And if something's wrong, one of them must be at fault. It doesn't look further than the educational reform needed. For example, part of my research is looking at the fact that there's historical socio-schooling structures that have existed since Federation and well before Federation, that really have centralised all three schooling systems within Australia and right under the federal, particularly in the way they control schools in terms of handing out funding. And that centralisation has really marginalised parents and kept them on the outer of schools. So that as more and more as the history of Australia has developed, we've gotten into this idea that teachers are the experts in schools and parents are the outsiders on the side. The faceless system. Public sees schools incapable of adapting to the needs of each student and family, impersonal bureaucracies, hard to navigate, unresponsive to students and family needs. And I'm sure there's a lot of your parents in your system who would have had personal experience of that. The school grounds. The public sees the school grounds as a physical location, therefore parent engagement must be on the school grounds. The other two, not so much. 4, schools as families. Practitioners are the ones who see schools as families or home away from home with similar goals and responsibilities towards children. Children are nurtured and cared for in the same way as families do. I have a big question mark about the fact that they use the same language, because my understanding is they use very school-centric language that often people don't understand, even someone like me who's worked in curriculum for most of my life. And I think that language sometimes also marginalises other people on the outside of that. Teachers do see that it is schools' responsibility to take over when families cannot adequately look after their children. And here's the 5th one, the one we've just discussed, that schools build citizens, and that's held by practitioners and policymakers. Interesting. Okay, we're going to move quickly on to cultural models of communities. What is your way of describing a community? And I know, Di, you just extended the school's boundaries out into the community, and that is our latest way of thinking in terms of parent engagement. What about other people? How would you describe the community in which you live? Anyone typing madly?
Yes, there is. And Peter's busy in the background trying to see if we can get mics on for people. Yeah, just to explain to those who came in a little later, this is the first time we've used this because our Zoom just wouldn't work for us today. So our apologies that you can't speak because it does it automatically, but we are working behind the scenes to try and do that. However, please in the chat, we're very patient, and I can see it going at 100 miles an hour there, so I'm happy to read that out. I hope by the next one we will have this little tweak fixed.
So do I, and then we can have a discussion.
Yeah, which I think would be good. Be
Yes.
great.
Kath, if people would like to put their hand up, I can attempt to turn the mic on for them.
Oh, okay.
This is a really collaborative meeting today.
Would someone like to give it a go? Natasha, would you? Oh, you're busy typing there, I can see. Jess, would you mind just trying putting your hand up, and let's see if we can turn your mic on. Oh, something went then. Okay. People. So it's seen by one participant as Jess's hands up, Pete. It's seen by one person as people and places in our immediate location that interact in a myriad of ways, and communities, they overlap.
Jess's mic is now active.
Okay.
It is, and I apologise because I'm multitasking by folding washing, so I couldn't get to the hand raise.
Okay. Let me just read one more, and then Jess, I'll let you speak. So another one was my community is a place of belonging, a source of connection and well-being. It's home for our local school, to which probably is the heart of her community. And I think you did answer the question correctly. It's quite a lovely summary. Jess, go for it.
Oh, I'm not sure I can add anything to that. That's pretty perfect. I don't necessarily agree that our school is the heart of our community, but it certainly plays a big part. But that probably comes to our particular area and our demographic. We have a lot of outer area families in our school hub, my personal school hub. So very small, isolated community, but a small community around the school.
Sorry, when you say outer, what do you mean? Sorry.
Oh, outer area. So we filter in families from other government areas, I guess. So I'm in a very small town that satellites to two bigger towns, not very much bigger, but bigger. And the public school where my children go to is often treated a little bit like a private school. It's a very high socioeconomic school and has a very good reputation for being excellent, rightly or wrongly. But that's a conversation for not this place. So,
yeah.
So.
Peter, Kate's got her hand up. Are you able to turn her on?
Kate, you'll have to turn. There you go. You're right.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Yeah, I just was thinking about my local community. For me, we've established really strong links with our neighbours, and we go for walks every day. And our local school, we're surrounded by independent and Catholic schools, and our suburb is the only one with a public school. So it's really interesting when we have like elections and stuff like that. Everyone in the local area comes to the public school for their democracy sausage, and I really feel like it's the heart of the local area. It's a sort of a small suburb inner west, but really everyone's really supportive of our school. And I think like a lot of things happen there. A lot of community groups gather there. So I find that I think that's why I made that comment. Yeah, I just think I'm really happy with the sense of the community where I am, and it's I know it's not the same for everyone, but where we are, it's really important to well-being. We look out for each other, and we there's lots of services and transport. So it's a really lovely way of being part of a community where we are.
That's a great description and very positive. It's wonderful. I'm going to head on and just show you how others, again, this is right across the United States, not a wide group, about 10 of each of these public practitioners and policymakers. So it's not a wide study, but I'm really interested in how we can, after this, how we can relate that to Australia. But let's have a look at, there are 5 cultural models of communities: the extended family, the community structures professional model, which only the policymakers hold, the unsafe communities. Now, I know in Di, when she put out the the blurb about what I was going to talk about, we spoke about the public's perception that student or young people's behaviour has gotten bad. And you see it on the news every day. You see it in Indigenous communities. You see it in the Prime Minister going to Alice Springs. And you see it in Queensland at the moment in youth crime. Now, the public does hold the unsafe communities belief, and it also holds a culture of poverty belief. Interesting enough, so also do teachers. The Poverty Matters professional is held by practitioners and policymakers. Now let's have a look at what they all mean just quickly. Don't want to bore you to death, but both public and practitioners see community as a collection of individuals connected to each other, not as organisations or institutions. And I think, Jess, that's what you were saying. Similar to an extended version of the family who show mutual concern for their neighbours. They support each other, share common goals of well-being and success. The community structures professional model, policymakers see community through an institutional lens as an organisation or a system. So policymakers would be dealing with the state, Catholic and independent educational systems and the institutional normative behaviours that happen as a result of those centralised institutions. Partnerships, sadly, are depersonalised and institutionalised.
Oh, don't we know that well?
I thought you might. The unsafe communities model, now this is a bit sad, but it highlights the negative and worst case scenarios when communities, particularly of colour and poverty, can interfere in the learning and are actually a danger or distraction to learning. And this is a dominant framework held by the public, fueled by public social media and news outlets.
And sorry if I just butt in for a second. It's also, we're just about to respond to the what's it called, the disruptive student. And it's interesting. I've had a little bit of a heads up from some people about, which realm have put this particular inquiry in place, and what they'd really like to see is the outcome. So it's really helpful for us to get in there and talk about the fact that the distractive or the disruptive young person has got challenges, and we need to support them, not segregate them and isolate them and marginalise them. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, that's good. You've got to realise that you're selling it to a public that holds a very different perspective. The culture of poverty, now this is held by both public and people in education. Poor communities are negative as they devalue education. Students from these communities are unable to achieve economic success, and their culture does not value hard work and academic achievement. The cycle of poverty is almost impossible, and this is sad that a number of our educators actually believe that these students cannot escape. This framework focuses on the negative values of the community instead of focusing on the structural inequalities and racism experienced by individual students. And the fifth one, and this is the framework by both education people and policymakers, attributes economic and educational disparities to the social and economic constraints that poverty impose on people. It recognises that there are systematic reasons why it's more difficult for students from poverty to succeed, and also notes the constraints that limit the ability of schools and families from poverty to engage with each other. On a positive note, Di, would you say our policymakers hold that positive perspective?
The positive perspective of, sorry, could you unpack that?
That there are systemic reasons, not just it's a bad family, bad kid reason for
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose where the difference is we still need the action to happen. We do lots of inquiries and we do lots of talk and we say the right things, but we're still not, moving quickly enough along that line to support those people. One of the comments I made the other day at one of the inquiries was that something as simple as Gonski, it came out when my granddaughter was in kindergarten. She's now in year 12 and she still hasn't benefited from that funding change that was supposed to happen. So we're a bit slow. While we recognise, identify and see the things that need to happen, including family engagement, it goes in and out of government policy like anything else. We're very slow at supporting what we discover. We have to have an inquiry into an inquiry, and yeah.
Lots of inquiries.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have many of the Gonski recommendations been implemented?
Some, but we still aren't anywhere near the funding levels that were from Gonski 1, or even Gonski 2, to be honest, in the government sector in particular. And it's seen that in the future that we will actually never reach the actual 100% school resource standard in the public system, a government system. So yeah, still some work to do yet.
Lots, don't tire yet. So there are, what actually happens now is all of those different models of schools, models of family, models of schools and community then affect, and we come up with 9 different models of engagement. What is actually meant by engagement? And notice that policymakers only hold 3 of them. And the interesting one, the charismatic leader, that it's all based on the charismatic leader of the principal. The public hold all of them, and practitioners, to an extent, hold just about all of them as well. But it's very difficult to get a handle on what is family, school and community engagement when we've got 9 different models based on this research in the US. It'd be very interesting to do our own survey in terms of what is the models that people have beliefs and assumptions about in Australia. Now, this is, and I read it earlier, what is the model from this particular piece of research? And I read the first one before. The second one is it centres on ways that schools initiate, sustain positive ongoing relationships with families and community organisations. 3, I think, is very crucial. Should be relational, intentional, goal-oriented and continuous. And it must involve recognition of the positive contributions of everyone involved in children's lives and be responsive to cultural differences. Now, I'm not sure that we actually have a definition in Australia, Di, please correct me, that everyone would agree to of parent engagement.
No, there's not an agreed one. There's a number of different ones. And all along the same lines, but definitely not looking at the positive interactions as much as what we would like them to. See, it not strengths-based, which I think is where we need to be going with this.
Good point. Both public and practitioners see engagement as an expression and transfer of care between teachers, parents and students. Care, that's an interesting. Teachers care when parents show they care. In reverse, if teachers are seen as caring, parents will care. And I've certainly heard that from a number of teachers and parents. Repeat and reinforce, that the family's job is really to repeat and reinforce academic lessons. It's passing the baton from school to family, but misses the benefit if we had 2-way non-academic relationships. It compartmentalises learning, this one, and all 3 groups hold this view that learning is divided into 2 distinct categories: abstract knowledge and practical interpersonal skills. This view treats engagement as not important, as kids learn different things in each place. This one is very much held by the public, that it resolves the crisis that might occur for poor attendance, performance or behaviour. That's the main reason for engagement. Engagement is personal. Public and practitioners hold this. It's about relationships between individuals. The more personal, the better. There is a need to get to know each other outside the roles. This is the Good Samaritan concept of community. This is about self-management, and that the greater the independence of the child and the age, then there's no need to be engaged, and that develops the belief that engagement is not necessary in secondary schools, which we know from research is certainly not the case. In fact, parents need to be more engaged than ever. And the last one, I think we've got a few more. 9, the public believes that social media technology interferes with people's ability to form relationships, blames phones, electronic devices for lack of effective communication between parents and children. Practitioners also hold this view and then say it's a little harder for students to learn to communicate, but this can be overcome with positive experiences with technology. Some interesting points of view. I've spoken about this one, that both practitioners and policymakers believe that the principal and their charismatic leadership, and I'd love your thoughts on this one in a minute, is the key to parent engagement within the school and within the community. And the 9th one, the last one, public and practitioners rarely discuss community engagement and are not able to decipher a coherent role for community because of the view that community is a collection of individuals. Interesting. Now, I value lots of comments now. As always, I have over-prepared, but I really love interaction now in terms of what people think. Is this relative to Australia? Do a number of these things currently exist? What's your personal opinion from your own personal perspective, whatever that be, parent or influencer or policymaker, and the whole range in between? Or do we have any teachers online tonight as well? Would really love to hear.
If you'd like to put your hand up, I think Pete can turn you on. Is that correct, Pete? Peter? He's got his microphone off, so he's probably talking away.
I did. No, I did. I was just trying to find where I was to turn it back on again. I can activate people's mics, and if they'd like to talk, just put their hand up.
I think
So long as
what we might do is, I'm not going to continue with this because it's 10 to 8, but I'll just show you what an engage. This is my research as well from the literature review. Engaged parents can play a role, and from all of the research that I've studied, and I've just rewritten my literature review of literature for about the 10th time, there are 6 key things that parents and teachers can focus on in terms of teachers' pedagogy and also parents themselves in the home as an engaged parent. And they are the social and emotional learning, number 1, the value of education, number 2, the holding and passing on of high expectations of the student by both the school and the parent, leading learning in the home, and that I'd love to unpack that at another time for you. Being engaged, becoming engaged very early, and you will never ever leave them because they're always your child, and you're always solving problems, even like me with my child the other day who was in Brisbane, stuck with COVID, and his father had to ring up a chemist and get a delivery for him. So they never stop being your child, and he's in his 20s. I've got one in 30s and one in late 20s as well. And the last one, homeschool communication. Now, I think I have bored people enough tonight, and I would really like to end on this, that my process is really about the ANT principle, that we're all in this together. The principle engages teachers, who engage students, who engage parents. And I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to go over to you, Pete and Di, and discussion.
Sure. There's 2 comments in the chat that I can read to you, Kath. The first one was that there's a belief that the principal fosters the culture of engagement in the school. And I agree with that. If the principal's not on board, we have real trouble. Another one was that parent groups are powerful. Parent groups can be powerful gatekeepers. So sometimes an ineffective or a bunch of sort of nasty, I suppose is a word, parent organisation won't let others in. And in actual fact, my daughter was just whinging about that about 10 minutes ago. Before I came here, I was actually looking after her kids so she could do the parent-teacher meeting night. And she said, she made that comment that lots of people won't go to their parent organisation meeting because there's a few that sort of gatekeep and keep you out. And we know that happens in society across everywhere, but it can play a powerful part in ensuring that families don't feel welcome at schools. My big issue at the moment at my children or my grandchildren's school, which was my children's school, are fences. I think that's some of the physical barriers are very real too. But does anyone want to put their hand up and have a have something to say?
I've activated everyone's mic. They're all on mute from their end at the moment. So all they need to do is activate their microphone. And Cass, your camera has been turned off from your end.
That's good. You don't need to see me.
I can see Kath. I can see Kath really well.
I'd like to see other people.
Yeah, so if you would like to turn your mics on, then you're more than welcome to join part of the discussion. I think that would be great in that last 10 minutes for us to hear from you guys. Particularly what's astounded me is the different thought processes from everybody. For some unknown reason, you think everybody thinks like you do, but obviously not. Particularly the policymakers. That's been a very interesting piece of information. So Jess.
Oh no, Jess, you go.
Oh, throw me under the bus there. My pet
it's my style.
I mean, is this where we gripe about parent engagement and the models that are? Because I find it quite frustrating that we have policy and good intentions, but the follow through is often quite ineffective, and certainly it feels quite often that family engagement is tick boxy. And it's not quite genuine, and I'm not sure how we go about changing that. It seems to be sometimes that it's an arduous process for teachers, and that we use examples of showing work or parent-teacher conferences as saying that's family engagement in learning without actually giving resources or again, my kids are in primary school, so the carrying on education at home is almost an impossibility because you can't actually, unless your children tell you what they're learning at school, actually know what is happening to continue that learning into the home setting. So, I would love some really good, strong policy to improve that in the future. So, anyway, I'll be quiet now.
No.
Kate. Sure.
Hi everyone. Yeah, just the concept of the charismatic principal is really interesting to me. Because I've seen some amazing principals really do amazing, brilliant work with community engagement, and you see it on social media, and you go to the school and you feel a sense of, welcome. But from as a teacher, how does that, feel? Sometimes you may not feel, that all the attention goes to the principal. You may not feel empowered. So it's a really interesting question. I'd really be interested in reading more on that. But on the other hand, you've got some principals who are completely against family engagement and will do anything to kind of keep that control and restrict communication. And it's just a really interesting concept. I just think that's really interesting. I never really considered that before. So thank you for bringing that up. And yeah, I'm really curious to read more about it. So thank you.
My pleasure.
It's interesting because sometimes the principal can make or break that situation, and sometimes the principal can feel inadequate, maybe if somebody knows something more about the community than they do. And really, leadership's about sharing information, and a good leader will just pull on the strengths of everybody else and go for the right, I think. I definitely do that with my team. There's plenty of people in my team that know more than I do and can do better things than I can do. Like sort out mics for a start, Pete. That's what it's about. And Kate said, and what if you're not charismatic?
Exactly.
Yeah, I just want to add, sometimes people may not be charismatic, but they may delegate, and you may not see them as charismatic, but they might be empowering the teachers below them and their team below them. But it is very powerful to see a charismatic person, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's great for the people under them or that they feel empowered. So it's just really interesting. Thanks again.
Yeah. Anyone else like to add something?
I'd just like to add, you're also good to be, it's Queensland time here, so it's 7 going on 8 o'clock. For some of you, it's much later, and I really appreciate you being here. So just pat on the back to all of you for turning up, and I hope I've presented something that is thought-provoking about why the next person doesn't hold the same position, understanding on parent engagement. And I hope my research, hopefully later in the year, I can present an Australian research about, in particular, teachers and why they haven't or have used it in their pedagogy and their teaching practice. So thank you for having me.
No, that's awesome. And some people have asked for a summary of your notes, and I'm sure we'll drag that out of you, Kath, and we will get you back to see the Australian perspective. I'd also like to find the Australian perspective on the people in power, the policymakers, because that's been a very hard nut to crack, to pardon the expression, and trying to get through to different people that you actually thought were on board, and really have put their hand up and sort of said no. But yeah, thank you, Kath. It's been wonderful, and it's been great to finally catch up with you and have you on board. And we will definitely pursue you later on in the year when your doctorate goes through. Good luck with it. Just to let everyone else know that there is going to be a recording of this, and again, the strength lies in my staff. Pete's going to make it all look pretty and put it up as soon as before he goes to bed tonight, I hope. No. Oh, come on, he's in Darwin. He's an hour and a half behind us. So he's got plenty of time to also let you know that on the 28th of March is our next part of the parent engagement series, and with that will be Amanda Water, Linda Willis, and Beryl Exley, and they're presenting the Engaging Parents in Curriculum project that they did in 2022. They were at our conference last year, but never got to complete their presentation, so that will be interesting as well.
I worked with Linda just in an ideas group, and I highly recommend the work that they are doing in Queensland is outstanding, particularly for teachers and teacher pedagogy.
Okay, well then I hope to see you all back here in 3 weeks or 4 weeks' time, I think it is, but on the Tuesday this time. And to also let you know that we'll send you email you a survey about tonight. so that we know that whether we're going in the right direction with what we're presenting in our family engagement series. And for those who didn't make it to our conference or didn't know about our conference last year, it's now online to view and to be a part of, and to have it. It's on demand, so that will be good for your watching pleasure. So thank you, everyone. And thank you across the country. The reason why we start at 8 o'clock on the eastern seaboard is because we have to make sure that we can accommodate for Western Australia. And so I appreciate everybody's time and look forward to seeing some of you again in a few weeks' time. Just stay tuned to our social media, and I'm sure we'll also send you all an invite to the next family engagement series evening. So thanks, everyone. Good night. I'd say travel safe, but you're probably going to walk out and make a cuppa now. Thank you all.
Thank you.